Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear. You've got a lovely top-down view of the GFI system's Duophony. GFI describes it as a parallel blender, which means you have two separate effects loops you can blend between and manipulate, turn on and off. But to me, telling you that doesn't help at all, so I'm just going to start off by demonstrating it from the rip during the intro. That's a sound that I like, and I've got two pedals that I like. They are the Blues Driver and the DD2. And maybe I don't want to run these pedals in series. If I run them in series, I will either delay the distorted sound or distort what's being delayed, both of which could get pretty muddy. So if I use the Duophony to land somewhere in the middle here, I have both of them unaffecting each other, just mixed at the end, and then coming through my mixer and everything else. So you can think of the Duophony as a pedal format mixer in some ways, two separate effects ends. But of course, we have things like this totally smooth variable control. I want just a little bit of delay, or I just barely want any distortion. And anywhere in between, controlled with presets, and this whole thing is configurable via Midi. Or another small example, maybe I really like the sound of my distortion, but I want some of my dry signal in there to sort of have the transient persist. The dry signal can be mixed in, and the dry signal can be mixed in along with whatever blend you have. I forgot the key was broken. So there's your super quick, hey, this is base level what Duophony can do. Everything else will be hands-on. I'll go into more detail. It does stereo. It does MIDI control. You can control things with an expression jack. There's so many other possibilities for what can come out of here. And it's so hard to even summarize what it is. That's why I'm doing this at the beginning. I want to give you as much of an idea of the capabilities before I start showing you how it works. You can think of it as a pedal format mixer. You can think of it as a loop switcher. You can think of it as a dry blend. There's modulation. It opens the door for creative tremolos. It's MIDI controllable. You can have an expression jack plugged in. And, surprise, way later in the video, you'll see me use the Duophony to blend and mix and modulate between two MIDI-capable sound sources I'm controlling with the same keyboard. Great. Stay tuned for that. It does so much, and I want you to have all that in mind. Maybe the combination of knowing what it can do and seeing me demonstrate something else, you'll figure out how it can work for you and your setup. This video is brought to you by GFI Systems and the distributor for my part of the world, Mass Distro. So thank you to both of them. Yeah, if you're subscribed, thanks for coming back. If you're a member on Patreon, thanks for doing that. It means the world to me. There will be an affiliate link below, probably to Perfect Circuit because they're the best. But that's it. Let's do some more in-depth, hands-on stuff. Here we are on the table. This is a totally mono setup right now, okay? So I have East Beast mono into the Duophony. Duophony's send loop out to patterns from Magpie pedals. Simon, thank you for sending this over. The output of that into the return of our X loop, and then our Y loop. The send is going to the input of bubbles. Also from Magpie pedals, this one I paid for. And then the output of that is coming into the return for the Y loop. And then the output for Duophony is just a TS cable. So we're mono the whole way through. I think it's a good way to show you the first few things. I'll change the stereo later, and I'll show you some other tricks, but this is where we're going to start, okay? And the way I have things set up right now, each of these foot switches is a different preset. So if I have neither on, East Beast passes through unaffected through Duophony and just comes out mono on the other end. If I turn on A, right now we're hearing both effects. And can you guys tell? I tried to color code everything. East Beast is blue and green. Duophony's blue and green. This pedal is blue. This pedal is green. Wow, Jorb. So if I, on this capacitive semicircle here, if I'm all the way green, just hearing patterns, which is a sequenced rate tremolo. If I'm all the way blue, just hearing bubbles, which is a sequenced time delay. They're pretty similar, but just so you understand what you're hearing, each of these trim pots is a rate for tremolo or a delay time. And it steps through the sequence. Anyway, of course, if I'm in the middle, I hear some combination of one or the other. Just patterns. Just bubbles. And that's kind of the core thing to understand. With everything else we're manipulating, it comes back to we're mixing two effects, okay? And I'm picking these two right now, not just because they're blue and green. I like them, and they're really, really different sounds. You wouldn't mistake this for that. So you can tell when things are changing. And just quickly, the capacitive thing, cool, interesting, new interface design, not always very responsive. But I find if I touch for a second, move slowly, it will find where I'm trying to go. Cool. And these A and B switches, like I said earlier, are presets. So right now we're on A. I can turn it off. We're back on and hit B. You can immediately see that it's a different mix. So let's say I want B to be all patterns, just patterns. And so bank A, hold these two encoders at the same time, press B to save it. And A, and I go to a part of the song where I just want this pedal to be audible. That's all I have to do. And if I want to get to more banks, you press both switches at the same time, and then if it's at hand's reach, I can scroll. So here's bank 2B. Back into the bank selection, scroll all the way to 1 and hit A. And there we are. And that will carry a lot of settings with it, not just your mix. That will carry your gain settings for each side. Good golly, I hope that's visible. It really should be. That'll carry your gain settings for each side. Then if I hold on this right encoder for a few seconds, we'll get another bunch of options. Those will get stored with the presets as well. So we can have the mode you've seen now, XY mix, and the one that makes the most sense, or Y plus X or X plus Y. So if I do Y plus X, we will always hear X. Right now, that's patterns. And this is just how much of the other effects, in this case bubbles, I want to bring in. So this will always be full. See, there's that encoder. It's just how much of this one do I want to bring in. Cool, and you might be saying, that's not that useful on its own. Let me grab something. This right here is in frame. Good God. How about there? Is a Chase Bliss expression slider. And if I plug it in, and then I eject the pedal out, I turn the, or power out, excuse me, I put the power back in. Make sure everybody's nicely in frame. It'll say expression pedal connected, and then expression pedal to mix. I can change it. So if I go to our A here, I can change our mix on an expression pedal. And remember, we are in Y plus X mode, so if I hold this again, modes in XY mix, go back to our original XY mix, I can mix between them just like we were. Okay, and there's our first, like, oh, now I get it. Here's two advantages this has over accomplishing something similar in a mixer. You have expression control or MIDI control, which I'll have to show you some of later. And you have all these presets. So does that kind of make sense for why we might have these other modes? Maybe you have a chorus and delay, and for one track, you want to fade in the chorus. You want to fade in the mix of the chorus. And another track, you want to fade in the delay. You always want the chorus to be there. You know what I mean? It's flexibility within the presets to make use of all these things that are plugged in a different way. Wonderful. I'm going to leave it on the XY mix mode. And still talking with presets in mind, we have options for series or parallel routing. Maybe some tracks, you want them to run these pedals to run into each other and not be mixed separately. If you have trails on, so that when you deactivate the pedal, the reverb and delay will fade out naturally. Sometimes you do want that, sometimes you don't want that. Some options for tap tempo, even where you get your tempo from, if it's from the global setting or the preset, all that can change for each of your A and B bank selections. Tons and tons and tons of options there. Okay, let me think. Is there anything else I want to show you while I'm still in mono? Yes! There we are. There we are. We have distortion from the blues driver or overdrive. and chorus from this Ibanez stereo chorus. Nice, love that buzz. The last thing I want to show you while we're still in mono, if I hold down and click, then we have options for modulation. So I leave it on, our shape here, for now. Just having a sine wave or a triangle. And the options here are normal and panning. Panning won't do anything while we're still in mono. Click in. If I want to change settings, for the LFO, press once to go through dry, and then here is speed and depth. So now we're mixing these variably back and forth. And if I hold in and click, our expression can be made to change the speed of our LFO. There you go. Tons of options for like manipulating these things in a way you might not think. So one more time, I'm thinking, is there anything I can show you, or I should show you while I'm still in mono? There are so many potential use cases for this, it makes it hard for me to demonstrate. So I'm trying to keep it like as straight up simple as possible and just keep growing as I go on. Anyway, in line with that, I'm about to make everything stereo. So give me just a second. Here we are now. Everything's running in stereo. This is my Yamaha Reface CP, and I'll leave all the effects off on it. That is running out of a insert cable, so it's 2 TS ends that go into one TRS end, and then TRS cables into and out of J-Split's generation loss, for send and return of loop X, then TRS from the send into Strymon dig, and then another insert cable out of dig into the return. And I have the expression pedal plugged in still. But now we're doing all the same stuff in stereo. Which is great. All crazy cool. And of course, if I go all the way green, that's gen loss. All the way blue is dig. One of the really cool things we can do now that we're in stereo, I can separate the mix of the left and right channels. So the way I'm doing that is holding this bottom pad of the touch-sensitive part and then sliding back and forth. So right now, all the way blue, our left channel is the dig, and all the way green, our right channel is the gen loss. And could you have guessed, that is something we can modulate. So the mode can be panning or normal if I turn it panning. And then I get to our LFO controls. I'm going to make it really, really obvious. You can see I'm having a little trouble with the touch again. We're on the panning mode for modulate. I've got a square wave, so it should be really obvious. Hope you're listening in stereo. Listen to your left and right ears. There you go. Hear them swapping around. That's really fast. This panic tremolo is swapping them left and right. So if I go back to a sine wave. Man, I hope you're listening in stereo. crazy sounds. There you go. That's a lot of the new stuff we gained with stereo. Almost too busy, but definitely some cool movement. And remember, all that stuff, we can still do all the same preset tricks, and expression pedal can be directed wherever we want, and I should probably show you some MIDI. Here I've got my MPC Live 2 plugged into the Duophony. That's the audio you're hearing. I left the same pedals, and I have MIDI plugged into the back of the Duophony. And that lets me do a bunch of things. So if I just record a short little loop, that'll work. And I go to this track, which is set up on MIDI, and that is to the right port that's going into the Duophony. And we turn it on. I have our MIDI CC channels set up to do a bunch of different stuff. So not a lot to see down here, really. There's good visual feedback on the Duophony. So I have mix on its own CC. I have turning on modulation, its speed and its depth. I'm sure you guys can see where this is going. Pretty much everything can be controllable with MIDI, which means we can also record it. So I recorded that movement of the MIDI CC that was handling mix. Here I am drawing in a shape for that mix xylophone. I'm making it really dramatic so you can see it drop to 0 and stuff. Glad that the visual feedback persists. And make sure that you have expression off, otherwise this won't work quite right. It'll still keep modulating. But I could do that for any of these parameters. And one more thing, if I do a program change here, as I click through, it will select all these presets. Different level of mix. And I'm not going to set it up because I'm not going to take the time to do it. I know if it's important to you, you'll understand how it'll work. So if I have pedals that are MIDI capable and have presets, a single preset change could change each of these pedals, their relative mix. And if I have expression doing a certain thing, or if I have MIDI CC set up to do a certain thing, that brings me to not exactly my main conclusion, but a big thing that I'm feeling with this. I think 80% of the people who are going to see this are going to go, oh, that's cool. I understand what that's doing. I can see how that might be useful to me. And there are 20% of people who are going to say, oh my God, that's exactly what I've needed for a long time. I think it might be live setups that are utilizing program changes who will see this as exactly the ticket to some of the flexibility they've wanted. And I think paired with a good MIDI CC controller, which I don't have, and I keep missing up opportunities to have people send me them. I think paired with a good MIDI CC controller, a synth player can find a lot of excellent opportunities for this. So there you go. I have one more idea that might not work, so I'm going to try that. And if it does, it'll be thrown in now. Here we are with that crazy idea. It does absolutely work. So I was just thinking of this as a mixer, as a MIDI controllable mixer. And a use case I ran into a few times live, I want a way to control two things with one keyboard while I'm playing, and maybe sometimes I'll listen to one, maybe sometimes I'll listen to the other. So instead of running any audio into the input, I'm running stereo from the reface CP into the return of X, and stereo out of the Roland S1 into the return of Y. I have two presets set up. If I press A, that's the reface. If I press B, that is the S1. And you guys know, of course, I can blend between them. That to me is a really, really cool use case. And I can't even help but wait. The first thing I want to try is modulating between them. Let's give this more sustain. Full depth on that. Pretty cool. To be able to blend between those like that. Man, I really couldn't help but try that modulate right away. But I could see this being really, really useful live, especially if you had an expression controller set up by your feet, you know, to be in between songs and say, this is a keyboard part. This is a synth part. And not have to change anything else or flick a switch to turn your Midi channel or whatever. Just have one expression pedal blending between them evenly. And maybe you can transition smoothly between them, or maybe you'll do it abruptly, whatever. All that combined with, hey, you can use program changes with all of these. You can use Midi CC to modulate all this. And if you're using 2 pieces of gear that can be controlled via Midi, there's a good chance you'll have gear that'll be able to do that, or it's something you wouldn't be afraid to attempt. Very cool. And this is another, maybe my favorite example of the Duophony can do stuff you could accomplish previously only in a DAW in a really handy hardware format. If I ever do like a sort of, this is my setup for a live show, like huge chance that I'll have the Take 5 or something else running into one end and the reface into the other. So yeah, there you go. On to the conclusion. I think the Duophony is super, super cool. It's a lot of thought, a lot of intention behind something that might not be seen as like a performance-rich environment. If I have any complaints, I don't love this capacitive surface being for a lot of really, really important functions. I recognize that a lot is happening with just 2 encoders. I don't love some of the implementation of it. I honestly wish it was easier to get out of one or both, even if the long press was a second shorter. And it works really well if you're using a whole mono setup or a whole stereo setup, but I had some trouble early on having mono pedals in the loops. You can't do a lot of the routing stuff I sort of expected you would be able to do. I found a lot to be desired as far as the way you could manipulate things in the stereo field using 2 mono pedals. I think the richness and the depth in every other aspect of this sort of made me expect that. Whether I was right or wrong to expect that, I wanted mono pedals to have more stereo flexibility with this. But overall, I think this is a super, super clever thing. And I know for sure some people are going to see this and immediately get very, very excited because it's exactly the sort of thing that would solve a lot of really specific setup problems. So there you go. My name's Jorb. I love gear. That includes the Duophony. Thanks, GFI. Thanks, Mass Distro. Cheers. So long.